Hands-on or hands-off, a guide to wildlife rescuing is just a bit of an introduction as to what to do in a couple of basic situations, basic scenarios that we hear of quite commonly for wildlife that the members of the public will come across. So we're going to outline a couple of those situations. We're going to go through what may be an orphan animal and what is probably not actually an orphan animal, and how to intervene in either of those cases. So just to start, a bit of an introduction to myself. There's a nice picture of me. Have my Bachelor of Science degree in zoology from the University of British Columbia, Okanagan. I've been at the Wildlife Rescue Association as a staff or volunteer member since 2011. I started as the kids camp counselor and as an animal care volunteer, and have since morphed into the helpline coordinator and have gone from there. And I'm just going into the transport rescue program head for now. I volunteer in all kinds of things. I'm a volunteer bird bander. I volunteer with the Marine Mammal Rescue with the aquarium. I volunteer with the Orphan Wildlife Society. Really love to just throw myself right in there with all of the anything related to wildlife, really. There's my email. If you have any questions that you don't think of till after the webinar, feel free to send me an email, or you can always call our wildlife hotline. I didn't actually put it in there, but you can Google it. It's at Wildlife Rescue BC, 604-526-7275 off the top of my head. All right. So urban wildlife, we share our cities with so many wild species, and there is no way within this time period that I could go through the natural history of each of those animals and what to do in a scenario with each of those animals. So we're going to just touch on a couple of basic topics. There's a bunch of pictures here of patients that have actually been in care recently at the Wildlife Rescue, except for this bear. It was not in care. We just saw it on Burnaby Lake, where our facility is located. So Canada is very diverse. There's coastal waters, there's prairies, all kinds of different ecosystems. We have many, many species, and each of those species, like I said, has its own natural history. Some of those species are more adapted to urban life. So this owl that you'll see in the picture here is a barred owl. It's much more adapted to urban life than its counterpart, the spotted owl, which lives in old growth forests in the deep woods, which can't survive quite as well in the city, the urban environment. So many of these animals that you'll come across more often, especially if you live in places like Vancouver, if you live in the bigger cities, you're going to see more of these urban animals that are a little bit more adapted. Or you may see some migrants, like this little guy on the top right-hand corner beside the frog is a little golden crowned kinglet. He's a migrant that will fly through on his way down south for the winter. And as we'll discuss a little bit later, these guys get into all kinds of troubles flying through cities on their way down. So be prepared, hands off. So our inclination as society today is kind of to want to go hands-on right away. But hands-off is actually the goal. We want to minimize as much contact as we can between us and the wildlife, because stress is the #1 cause of death for wildlife. So we want to make sure that they can't see us, that we don't want to see them except for from a distance, from a safe distance, that we're comfortable with, that they're comfortable with. We always want to watch first. You can always call a wildlife rehab if you don't know what to do. You can always do some Googling, although do that with a grain of salt, because not all the information that's out there is correct. You can take some photos from a safe distance and send those over to a wildlife rescue. For example, this is a bat in this photo that we're monitoring right now. Hopefully we'll get a call back about it today. Hopefully that it's flown off. It's been in the same spot for 2 days now, and that's a little bit of a concern with these guys, but it looks like a pretty comfy roosting spot. And again, natural history, this is a juvenile, and we actually rescued a juvenile from this site 2 weeks ago that was fine. It was in good condition. It was just a young bat and didn't quite know where to roost yet, didn't know bat behavior and how it should be acting. So with this guy, he's hopefully in good shape. We're hoping that he flies away, but again, we're going to take our time. We're going to monitor him. We'll see if he's still there today, and if so, we'll send somebody out with an experienced eye to take a look at him and see whether he needs to come into the hospital or not. So you want to use your basic observation kit. Your mostly has those. Ears are especially important for birds, and learning to identify birds by ear is very difficult. Luckily, there are lots of apps out there that will listen to the bird call that you're hearing, so you can record it, and you can find those bird calls and kind of identify what bird that is from that song. Knowledge, so this webinar, lots of books out there. Google, again, with a grain of salt. Use your binoculars if you're looking at something farther away, or if you want to leave a little bit of distance between yourself and the animal. Patience is very important. Again, with this bat, this is day 3. We're taking our time. We're going as slow as we can. We're making sure that we know where the bat is exactly, and if it's going to be in the exact same spot tomorrow. A camera, again, with this bat. Over the helpline, we assess animals all the time using cameras, using pictures of those animals, and a safety mindset. For sure, you need to be aware of the animal's natural defenses. Never touch a bat, for example. Diseases, again, if a bat bites you, not only will it hurt, but bats are the only known vector of rabies in BC. In Ontario, I believe skunks and raccoons will also carry rabies. Foxes in some areas do as well. So you do want to be very cautious of that, of diseases, and of sight hazards as well. So this is by an elevator. Who knows if there's something wrong with that elevator, if it's in a public area, what might be going on. So you need to just be aware of what's going on around you at all times. So being prepared for hands-on. Internet culture, again, we want to be hands-on. Everybody wants to get that video. Everybody wants to be the hero. Don't panic. Don't try to be the hero when you don't need to be. Be aware of the animal's natural defenses. You don't want to approach a skunk, come running at it, and get a mouthful of skunk spray. Trust me, I've had it happen. It's not very pleasant. Again, be aware of the diseases and sight hazards. You want to step back, call a professional, learn about this animal, and assess the situation before you intervene. That being said, if you do need to intervene, you want to have a basic rescue kit ready. So towels, just like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a towel is a wildlife rescuer's best friend. The best way to minimize stress between an animal and a person, for yourself and for the animal, is to make a wall between you and the animal using that towel. Cover up that animal's eyes and any pointy bits that animal might have, and get that animal safely, contain it into a cardboard box or a shoe box. If you're containing a mammal, we want to be even more hands-off because, again, we are mammals as well. So we're going to get a lot more diseases from those guys. You're going to use a recycling box and just plop that, like you would catch a spider, over top of that mammal if that mammal is immobile. You can also use live traps, or the box stick string trap we actually recommend quite a lot, that you'll see in old-fashioned cartoons. You prop up a box using a stick, you tie a string to that stick, you sit at the end of that string, put some food underneath the box. Hopefully the animal goes underneath there. You can pull the string and get the animal underneath the box, and it's well contained. You want to have, so a recycling box, also awesome. You want to have some gloves, so nitrile or latex gloves at any time, just to protect yourself from any diseases that might be transferred. Thick gardening gloves or oven mitts will protect you from, hopefully, any teeth if you are handling anything toothed. But we just want to make sure that you're being very safe. And a heat source, so if you find any orphans that aren't capable of thermoregulating on their own, you want to make sure you've got a water bottle that you can fill with warm water, and or hand warmers that you can keep these little guys warm with. And you want to have, most importantly, a post-containment plan. So you've got this animal in a box. What are you going to do now? What are you going to do with it? You can't keep it yourself because I'm not sure if you know the natural history of that animal. It's not legal to keep it for more than 24 hours without the correct permits. Wildlife Rescue actually has permits to hold animals for more than 24 hours and to get that treatment into those animals with the goal of releasing them back to the wild. And you want to look up where is the nearest permitted rescue. So the Wildlife Rehabilitators Network of BC for British Columbia has a nice list of all the rehabs in BC on their website. In Ontario, I believe there is something similar. I'm not sure about the rest of Canada. I've actually been working myself on compiling a list of all the rescues in Canada, but it's taken quite some time because there's a lot of us. And a lot of smaller home rehabbers, which are awesome. So services provided by the Wildlife Rescue. That brings us into what we do at Wildlife Rescue. The hands-on part is the part that everybody kind of gets sucked into, that everybody wants to get more of. We are an animal hospital, and we are permitted by the government, as I mentioned, to rehabilitate and release wildlife in distress. So we are permitted to hold these animals for more than 24 hours. We have trained, experienced technicians, veterinary technicians, and veterinarians who can look at these animals. For example, this skunk, we actually, the fur bearers did a wonderful outcall for us. This is a skunk that we got in late August that had had its leg caught in a leg hold trap, and it is actually recovering quite well at the moment. It's in one of our outdoor enclosures. Still has a couple of weeks to go before it's up to snuff and before it can get back out into the wild. But the fur bearers have done a wonderful call out trying to find the owner of that trap, trying to find the person who set that trap so that we can get some consequences going there for that person, for this poor skunk. So again, we do surgeries, we do We focus on natural history and on the diet of the animals, on medication and the treatment plan. And with these animals, with wildlife, natural history and their enclosures are just as important as the medical treatment plan you've got them on. So these animals want to feel more like they're at home. The more they feel like they're in a hospital, the less they're going to heal and the longer it's going to take them to heal. As I mentioned earlier, stress is the #1 cause of death in wildlife in captivity. All right, go to the next one here. So hands off. Wildlife Hotline. This is, again, what I've been doing for a while now. We inform the public over the phone regarding basic wildlife concerns, and we also assess situations over the phone. There's a nice picture of a northern pygmy owl on somebody's iPhone, just for a reference of size. That's actually our smallest owl that we've got in BC here. And there's a swan. So this swan, I remember this call. It was on Trout Lake in Vancouver. And the call came in that there was a swan that looked like it was sleeping. And so we had to assess over the phone, what's that swan doing? It's not holding up its head. Okay, can you take a picture of that animal and kind of go from there? So we did get a volunteer out there to take a look for the swan. At that point, the swan had perked up and flown off. So there's sometimes not much we can do if an animal can fly. If an animal can get away, it is going to get away because it sees us as a predator. So you have to keep that in mind as you are working to help an animal hands-on. They will do their best to get away from you because they don't know that you're trying to help them. They think that you're going to hurt them. I can't put that thought in their minds, but probably they think you're going to hurt them. Hands-on wildlife rescue. So this is a program that's still growing with wildlife rescue, and this is a program that not all wildlife rescues can offer. With our wildlife rescue team, these are some of our key volunteers right here. You've got our ex-RCMP officer Perry Edwards, Liz Grant with the goose here on the right. This team actually chased that goose for a good 3.5 months. It was called their Moby Dick because they chased it for so long. It had fishing line around its leg. And we finally did catch it, and it was actually able to be released, which was awesome. And Kathy Kenning, I believe, on that day did at least 8 transports for us. She did 26 releases. That being said, most of those were in flocks, so at the same time. But just transport and release volunteers, rescue volunteers are awesome for our organization. We really rely on them. And yeah, that's all I have to say about those guys. They're great. And hands-off wildlife education, teaching members of the public and their children about wildlife and the work wildlife rescue does so that they can be prepared to do wildlife rescues or not do wildlife rescues, hands-on or hands-off, as it were, so that we can have ambassadors out in the field passing on that information to more people, getting all that information out there as to how people can help wildlife. Hands-on injured wildlife, here's what you're waiting for. So if you see an animal who has been caught by a cat, you need to bring that into a wildlife hospital as soon as possible because cats have bacteria in their mouths that transfer into that animal that can cause infection very quickly, that can get that animal sick and cause it to die within 24 hours. Even if your cat catches a bird and the bird looks like it's fine and it flies away, it's a happy thought for you, but it's likely not a happy ending for that bird shortly after it flies away. So again, you're looking for a drooping wing, any visible blood, a limp. Importance of observation, again, in this site, you'll see on the bottom left here, we've got a picture of a killdeer, and killdeers are good fakers. So to defend their nests, mother and father killdeers will actually pretend to have a broken wing to lead you away from their nest so that you're leaving their babies alone. You're keeping their babies safe. So you want to follow them for a long distance, and then you'll see them fly away. So we don't want to get in any killdeers with fake broken wings just because they're trying to protect their nest, because we want them to be able to stay and keep their babies warm and make sure their babies are okay. So again, natural history, very important with rescuing these animals. You want to be very careful. Again, the sharp-shinned hawk up on the top corner here, I hit a window, so was stunned. Easy to throw a towel over top of it, scoop that whole thing up, or just plop a box over top and slide something underneath like you would catch a spider. Drooping wing, you can see on this grosbeak down in the corner here, has a nice figure 8 wing wrap on so that we can splint that broken bone that's in there and get it healed up so the bird can fly again. And a skunk, again, be cautious when trying to catch wildlife. You don't want to stink and you don't want to get bit. That's that. Hands-off injured wildlife. So I Googled lots of pictures of cats wearing cat scrunchies, and they all looked very displeased. This guy was probably the least displeased of all of them, but it's for the better for your cat and for the birds. These cat scrunchies actually work very efficiently. There was a study in Australia done on them that causes at least an 80% decrease in the amount of birds that cats catch when they're wearing this scrunchie. Because of the bright colors, birds actually have a major focus on being able to see colors. They have way better visual cortexes than we do. And there's also a reflective bit around the side. So if you don't want to put the money into getting a cat scrunchie, you can also attach some flagging tape around your cat's collar so that it looks like a lion's mane. Nice bright colored flagging tape. Again, that will move as the animal is in that pouncing position and will cause the birds to see that there is a predator in the area and hopefully get away. That being said, we'll go into fledgling birds quite shortly, and they will likely not know or not be able to fly, so they still can't quite get away from these guys. So the best bet for these guys is to keep your cats indoors at all times, and to build a catio and walk them on a leash. This is a picture of my nephew walking my friend's cat on a leash. That we like to make sure they're contained. Treat your cat like your dog, so you wouldn't let your dog roam the streets willy-nilly. We don't want you to let your cat do so either, because they are causing a major decimation on bird populations. I had some stats here. There you go. Cats have caused about 32 extinctions of species of birds, and an estimate, low estimate probably, is that cats cause the deaths of 1.4 billion birds a year. So it's a big problem. If your cat catches one bird a year, it may not seem like a big deal to you, but there are hundreds of thousands of cats out there, and if each of those cats catches one bird each year, that's hundreds of thousands of birds that are dying each year. So it's not a natural predator to the area. We'd like to keep your cat safe, as well as those birds. Again, outdoor cats have an average lifespan of about 5 years. Indoor cats have an lifespan of about 15 years. So it's for the better of your cat as well. Side note on that is to always vaccinate your pets, even if your cats are indoor cats. We've had so many bats come in that have gotten into old houses through windows or through chimneys. And bats, again, are the only known vector of rabies in BC. If your cat is not vaccinated, that means the life of that bat. So if your cat has caught a bat that's in your house, that bat, and your cat is not vaccinated, that bat may be a carrier of rabies, and the only known way to test for rabies is to use brain matter. So that animal needs to be euthanized to sent off for testing. It's a little bit sad, but we don't want it to happen. We want to encourage people to vaccinate their cats and vaccinate their dogs for the safety of both your cat and that dog and yourself, because if your cat comes into contact with a bat that is rabid, we want to be very cautious of your health and of the cat's health and of the bat's health. Everybody involved, stay safe by vaccinating your cat. Simple solution. Should be done, I think, every 3 years with cats. All right, getting into orphan wildlife here. You want to make sure, if you find what you think is an orphan animal, that it is truly an orphan. So you want to look for any dead parents in the area. There's major differences between birds and mammals in finding orphans. Major differences in types of birds when finding orphans. So we see a barn owl here in the middle, some mallard ducks on the right-hand side, and some chickadees on the bottom, and some squirrels up on the top. There we go. So orphan birds. Natural history, can't stress it enough, very, very important when you found an orphan bird. There are 2 different strategies in life for having babies. You can have babies who are precocial, and this is like little ducklings or little shorebirds that are born hatching and peeping, little chicks. They're born hatching and peeping. They're born able to feed themselves. They're born walking. They mainly rely on their parents for protection and thermoregulation. So these little ducklings, you can see, they're pretty fresh. They hatched quite recently, but they can walk and they can feed themselves. They're mostly okay. If you find a duckling that's by itself, it does need its mother's protection and mother for thermoregulation, and will likely not make it through the night without that mother present. So if you find a duckling by itself, definitely catch it and bring it into a wildlife hospital to be raised with other ducklings, because it probably won't do very well on its own. The other strategy is altricial birds. So this picture up on the top here is some, I think, finches, but I can't say that definitively. They are born naked and helpless. Just like human babies, they need their parents' guidance, and they need their parents to help them survive for the first week or so of their life at least. With these little guys, they need their parents for thermoregulation. They need their parents to protect them from predators, pretty much everything you can think of they need their parents for. They need their parents to feed them. You want to get creative if you find an orphan bird. You want to know the natural history, of course. You want to know whether it is altricial or precocial. So duckling, definitely pick it up if it's by itself, no mom in sight. You can look for a mom, and if you actually pick up a duckling, it'll put out a little peep alarm call. You can do that for about 30 seconds and see if mom comes running back. If she doesn't, after about 20 minutes, then we would definitely call a wildlife rescue and get that baby in. If you find an altricial bird, we'll go into that in a second here. And remember that most wild moms are good moms. So they want to take care of their babies. They've put energy and resources into making that egg, into hatching that baby, into feeding that baby for however long they've been feeding that baby. That being said, sometimes they will kick out babies that have genetic defects or that are not going to survive if they have diseases. Sometimes they will intentionally do that, and that's something we see in wildlife rescue. We see babies coming in that are not in good shape, and it's because the parents have intentionally thrown that baby out of the nest, and we do our best for those babies as well, just like any other baby that comes in. So hands-on with nestlings. So great way to tell if a bird is a nestling or not is to, let me just see here, is to look at where it's gaping. So a bird's gape is pretty much when it opens its mouth for food. With these little guys, something you'll see in all of these pictures that they all have in common is that they are gaping upwards. So they are meant to be most often in a cup-shaped nest. And in that cup-shaped nest, because there are walls on all the sides, they will need to gape upwards for their parents to feed them from above. The bigger the mouth they have, the more likely they are to get fed over their siblings. With these guys, keywords are not hopping and featherless. So a lot of these guys you'll see on the top row here and the bottom one picture. We've got the evolution of a family of chickadees. I think these are multiple families, but different age stages of some chickadees. So freshly hatched on the top left, as they grow up, this is probably about 2 weeks old on the bottom there. They grow up very quickly. They develop those feathers very quickly. On the bottom, they are still nestlings. You can see on the guy on the very right-hand side, he still has some pin feathers. So their feathers grow in little sheaths and little tubes. And you can tell that those feathers are still growing if they are in those little tubes. That is likely still a nestling. They won't actually fledge until their feathers have mostly erupted from those little tubes. Just checking here that I didn't miss anything there. You'll want to be creative. So if you find a nestling on the ground, you want to check if it's bleeding, if it's bruised, if it's had contact with a cat. If those are the cases, please call your wildlife rescuer that's nearest to you. Again, you can find those online. If it is in good condition, but it's a little bit cold, you can just warm it up in your hand. And with birds, you really don't need to worry about that myth that says parents won't take them back if they've been touched by a human or a predator. Most birds, turkey vultures aside, have pretty much no sense of smell and will feed their babies. They're good moms. They want to take care of those babies. Again, they've had those resources go into those babies. They're going to keep putting those resources into those babies. So if you put it back in the nest, mom will feed it again. You just have to wait a matter of time to see if mom will come back to continue to feed it. Again, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes they will kick babies out of the nest intentionally. And if she kicks it out again, you see it, find it again about half an hour later, then just call your wildlife rehabber. If it's been kicked out of the nest twice, there's probably something going on. It'll probably have to come into the hospital. Sometimes if you find a baby, you're not sure of its natural history, again, call the wildlife rehabber. We'll help you figure out what the species is. Birds nest on the ground, birds nest on rooftops, birds nest on beaches, birds nest in trees. They nest in all kinds of different places. So you want to put the baby back in the nest in the right spot. If it's in a tree, or if you think it's in a tree, you can fashion up a makeshift nest if you can't find the original nest out of strawberry baskets. Strawberry baskets are great. They've got those beautiful drainage holes in the sides and the edges, just in case it rains. Or you can make a Tupperware or margarine container, poke some holes in the bottom so that any water can drain out. And just put the baby on a soft cloth inside of that. Hide it up in a tree as high as you can get it, and watch from a distance, or set up a camera, watch nonstop to see if the parents come back. You can, again, play a recording of those babies' calls. So if you tape that baby with your phone camera for a little while, hopefully get a picture or a video of that baby calling, and then play that call for about 30 seconds. See if mom and dad come back. If you hear any similar sounding birds in the area, they will probably come back. Again, they know where their nest is. They know where their baby is. They want to take care of it. So they will probably come back for it. Next stage of life for babies is fledglings. So I just see I've got a question here. Snakes. Okay. Sorry, sidebar. So fledglings. Fledglings are different than nestlings in that they are about 3 to 4 weeks old. They are ready to get out of the nest. It's actually safer for them to be out of the nest than it is for them to be in the nest because they are loud and obnoxious and they're teenagers and they make a lot of noise. They're going to attract all the predators. They're nice and big, juicy looking, fluffy. So predators are going to try and get them, and it's actually safer for them to be hopping around on the ground, learning how to fly, hiding in bushes, and learning to feed themselves than it would be for them to be sitting sedentary in a nest. So they will be out and hopping around. Keyword with these guys is that they are hopping. So if you see a bird that looks like it's the size of an adult bird, might be a little bit fluffier, but it is hopping and it can't fly, just watch it for a while. See if you see the parents coming down to feed it. With these guys, they will gape forward. So baby birds, nestlings, and hatchlings will gape upwards, again, because they should be in the nest, as nestlings should be. Fledglings are fledging, so they're learning how to fly. They gape forward because their parents, they're the same height as their parents. They're mostly the same size as their parents. They're at eye level, so they can gape forward towards their parents to get them to put that food in their mouth. You can look with these guys, you can see on most of these pictures here, that they have what's called gape phalanges. So they've got little lips on the side of their mouth. They look a little bit more fluffy than their parents would. They're not quite as shiny or sheer. And they are sometimes a little bit smaller, but they definitely have shorter tail feathers. So these little babies, again, they'll be hopping on the ground. You don't want to intervene if they're in a dangerous area. And the most common call we get about these guys is that we're worried about cats in the area. There's not much we can do about that. We'd love to take in all the animals in the Lower Mainland as a wildlife rescue and raise them, but definitely we wouldn't do as good of a job as the parents. And those babies are going to need to learn about cats, whether they learn it when they're babies or whether they learn it when they're adults. So it's something that's got to happen. We just try to get people to keep their cats indoors as often as possible here. Excuse me. We don't suggest that you try to feed fledglings because what the parents will do, I've just got a question here. I'll answer the questions at the end, I guess. What the parents will do if you feed the baby will not be hungry anymore. It won't be calling for its parents. The parents will actually sit up in bushes and hold food for their baby so that the baby has some motivation to get up into the bushes, has some motivation to learn how to fly, to get off the ground quicker so that it can get away from predators. If you're feeding that baby, if you stuff a little robin full of worms, it's going to be full, it's going to be happy to sit on the ground, and it's going to be open to predators that might come by and pick it up. So we don't suggest that you feed them because the parents will take care of that. That's what they're doing. That's what they're meant to do. They're going to do a great job of getting not only the right nutrition to that baby, but they're going to make sure that that baby learns how to fly while it's eating. Next here. So hands off with orphan mammals. Orphan mammals do follow the myth. It's not a myth. They do follow the information that if you touch them, their parents may or may not take them back. Mammals do have a really good sense of smell, so you want to observe from afar. You want to confirm that they are orphans. So stay hands off first, as always. Sprinkle some flour around the den entrance or cover the den entrance with paper if there is a den for these babies. With baby bunnies, what you can do is actually make a crosshatch pattern with some string over top of the nest because they'll just nest in a little hollow in the ground covered in grass. So you make a crosshatch pattern with some string like X's and O's and just leave that there for 24 hours. Come back 24 hours or 12 hours later and see if that pattern is disturbed. If it still looks like X's and O's, or if it's been pulled aside, you'll be able to tell if mom has been there or not. And if mom has been there, awesome, you are not needed. If she hasn't been there, call your local wildlife rehabber. We'll help you figure out what to do next. So hands-on with orphan mammals. Always ask a rehabber first. There are 2 different strategies for mammals for their babies: the stay and place, stay and wait, sit and wait, there we go, sit and wait strategy, or the follow along strategy. So deer and seals and rabbits are a really good example of the sit and wait strategy. So mom will actually leave her babies for 12-ish, up to 12 maybe hours, while she goes and finds food while she explores, because her babies can't run as fast as she can, because her babies can't find food yet, and because her babies, in the case of deer at least, don't smell like anything. So her babies don't smell like anything. She smells like deer. Predators are going to smell her, and they're going to smell that there's a deer around. They're going to come looking for a baby. Whereas if her baby is sitting laying in the grass by itself, predators won't smell it, but she can be nearby in the bushes looking over that baby. So with those guys, they're sit and wait moms, away from home moms. So you can just leave those babies as they are. Monitor them again for as long as you can. You can set up a GoPro or a camera on them to see if mom is coming while you are away, because while you are there, if you are close to that nest, mom is not going to come back because she sees you as a predator. She sees you as a threat to her babies and herself. So she's not going to come back if you are there monitoring the nest or if you have changed the nest in any way. So we don't suggest putting pylons around the nest or the baby. We don't suggest intervening in any way if you find babies by themselves that are bunnies, deer, or seals, unless there is, again, something obviously wrong with that animal. So if there's any blood, if it seems overly thin, if it's had contact with a cat or a dog, definitely call a wildlife rehabber and we'll help you figure out what to do. Be scent conscious with these guys. So wear thick gardening gloves. This is where this comes in handy for your rescue kit. Your thick gardening gloves will hopefully smell like dirt. They won't smell like human so much. So when you pick up these babies, you're not putting your scent on them, and you're also protecting yourself from their little teeth, which can be very sharp. If you do touch them with your hands, make sure you rub an apple core or some grass clippings on them just to get rid of that scent, cover up that scent of yourself and make them smell like something a little bit more natural. Try to reunite. So you'll want to get them into a cardboard box with the original nest material if you can. Wrap a hot water bottle in a towel. Again, towels are awesome. Wrap a hot water bottle in a towel, put that in there with them because babies are not quite as able to thermoregulate as their parents. Patience and YouTube, again, you can YouTube the call of those babies and play that for about 10 to 30 seconds to see if the parents will come back. Again, if you're standing right beside the nest, mom probably won't come right up to you for her babies. You'll have to back off at least 10 feet to see if she'll come back, and watch very, very patiently for rather a long time before anything happens with these guys. So again, we want to stay as hands-off as possible with these little guys. Hands-on pollution damaged wildlife. So the turtle in the bottom here, I don't know if you can see it very well, has a fish hook in his mouth. Fishing line is something we definitely see too frequently in our wildlife. Especially, we know where the local fishing ponds are because we get ducks from there quite often. This is a western painted turtle. It's actually a protected species in BC. There's a skunk up here on the top with a Slurpee lid around its neck. So the Slurpee lids, the lids from any of those dome-shaped lids that are plastic, skunks, as they are babies, will try to get through that lid to the delicious sugary substance that's inside of the cup, and they'll get that lid stuck on their head. Because skunks have heads shaped like arrows, they can get their head through, but they can't get it back out. And we do see probably about 5 or 6 of these guys around this time of year, actually, that have grown into those lids. So they get their lids on their heads when they're babies, and that lid gets stuck, and as they get older, they grow into the hole around that lid, which sounds awful and is awful, and they get it stuck. It starts to hinder their ability to survive, especially through the winter. So we usually end up chasing after these guys, or live trapping them and getting them into the hospital, hopefully getting that piece of litter off before it's caused damage. But we always do want to remove that litter in the hospital just in case it's caused any damage to the flesh underneath that might need some sutures or some treatment right away. So we'd have to flush it out right away. Again, this raccoon here is stuck in some garden netting, so that you'll again want to call a wildlife rescue to help out with, because he may be more tangled than it is easy to get him out, and it may be a case of sedating the animal to safely remove him. So we want to be, again, very cautious and very careful for ourselves and for the animal, being aware that they are stressed out by the close proximity of a predator, and that we're stressed out because we're doing this exciting thing. So hands off with pollution damaged wildlife. We never suggest that a member of the public try to wash a bird or an animal on their own, because it's a very, very stressful process. We've got a barred owl here on the bottom corner that flew into somebody's barbecue and got covered in oil. This up here on the top is a bufflehead that was part of the Marathassel oil spill a couple of years ago in English Bay. And this bat is actually covered in insulation foam. that we had to remove as well for these animals. So in order to do an oil spill bath, it takes a very, very approximate temperature for these animals to firstly not cause hypothermia if it's too cold, and not cause skin burns, because animals, birds especially, have much more sensitive skin than we do as humans. They burn very, very easily. So we want to be very cautious of that, not causing hypothermia and minimizing stress. So having someone who's experienced doing this is going to speed up the process, is going to have as fast of a bath as possible and as thorough of a bath as possible to try and get that animal safely out of that situation, because it is very, very, very stressful for them to have a forced bath. None of them that I know of have ever enjoyed it. So we want to be very cautious of that. Again, if you find an animal on sticky tape, on a sticky trap, we don't suggest people use sticky traps, but please, please do not remove that animal. Pulling that animal off could break bones, could remove feathers. Animals that we see and care that have been removed by the finder don't tend to do very well if they come in on the trap or in the trap. If they're in a leg hold trap or anything like that, we have the experience and we have the handling know how to get these animals safely off of that trap with causing minimal damage. I've seen YouTube videos that people dump oil on that animal. I think there was a mouse a while back that somebody dumped some coconut oil on to pull it off of a trap and then let the mouse go. I can almost guarantee you that that mouse probably didn't make it. It probably got hypothermic and didn't do very well over the next period, which again is our system of, in the media, being a hero and helping that animal. And once that animal is out of your sight, you feel good because you've done something right, but you do have to keep into account what is going to happen to that animal afterwards. So window strikes, here's something that everyone can help with. If you have an animal that has hit your window, a bird most likely, use your rescue kit. So you've got your shoebox ready, you've got your towel ready, you've got your gloves ready. Put that animal into that box, cover it up with a towel, wait 30 minutes, put that box in a nice quiet, dark spot, a nice warm spot, away from any people or pets. A bathroom or a closet works well. Just wait 30 minutes to an hour. Leave that animal all by itself. Take that box outside after 30 minutes to an hour. Open it up away from the window so that it's not flying into the window and away from any streets, so it's not going to fly into any cars. And if that bird flies away, that's awesome. That's exactly what we want to happen. The majority of the time when birds hit windows, they're simply stunned. They just need some time to collect themselves, and then they can fly off quite happily after they've been in a nice, dark, quiet, safe spot for a while. If they're staying out on your patio or porch or wherever they've hit a window, they're going to be more stressed out because they're going to be constantly looking for predators. They're going to have to be on the lookout at all times. Whereas if they're in a dark, quiet, safe box, again, they can't see anything. Nothing can see them. I call it the Ramona Quimby theory. I used to read those books as a kid. She can't see anything, has her eyes closed. So theorizes that nothing else can see her because she can't see anything. So with wildlife, it's very similar. If they can't see you, you don't exist. So keep them nice and dark and quiet. They'll feel safer. After half an hour, they should fly away. If they don't fly away, contact a rehabber, and don't feed or water the animal just because they've been through a trauma. What I equate it to members of the public over the phone is that if you've just seen a car accident or you've just seen an accident happen, your inclination is usually not to come up to the person and offer them a hamburger or offer them some cake. They don't probably want to eat it, firstly. Secondly, the hospital will probably not be very impressed with you because that person may need x-rays or may need some internal surgeries or something like that. So again, we don't suggest feeding the animal because we want to have an empty stomach just in case we need to do surgeries, anything like that. Keep that animal safe and dark and quiet. Hands-off window strikes. There is an excellent program in Toronto you guys are very fortunate to have. It's called FLAP, and they actually go around the lower city during fall migration, which is right now, and they look for animals, for birds that have hit windows every morning, very early in the morning. They have rounds that they do. There are innovations now to make your windows visible to birds. So if you look online, you can find window alerts and window stickers that are actually UV light. So you put the sticker on your window. We have these all over our wildlife hospital. You can see barely anything. You can see the outline of a hummingbird. Here's one of their options. The birds can see like a glowing sticker on the window. They know a little bit more that there is a window there, and it's not just the reflection of the trees behind. It's not just the trees that are on the other side of the window that they're going to try and fly towards. They see that there is a bit of a barrier there, so it does reduce the impacts on those windows, especially during fall migration. Another thing you can do if you work in an office building is make sure those office building lights are turned off at night. As birds migrate, they tend to go towards the light. So if they see lights that are not natural lights, they will still go towards them. I believe the 9/11, the 2 pillars of light that they actually had to shut down for a while during fall migration, just for those birds, because it was collecting thousands and thousands of birds way up high that were being thrown off of their migration pattern, off of their migration route, by that distraction of light. I should speed up a little here. Hands-on cruelty cases, again, you'll want to call the authorities. So as wildlife rescues, we have very little authority to actually handle these kinds of situations. We're a wildlife hospital, so we'll help the animal out as much as we can. Organizations like the SPCA, they have a cruelty hotline. Conservation officers, they work towards helping the animal as much as possible in cases, especially where it is a protected animal, like this painted turtle. Again, somebody had kept this painted turtle in a small bowl for, I think, 10 years, 8 to 10 years. So its shell was all deformed. I believe that animal ended up going out to a breeding program in BC here because it did still have genetically relative genes, so it was going to hopefully be able to be a breeder. This pigeon was shot up on the top here, was shot with a blow dart gun, which is an illegal weapon in the city. It's illegal to oh my goodness, it's illegal to set off any firearm in the city. This is a skunk up top here that was very, very fortunate in that it was caught in a conibear trap, which is legal because it is it is lethal within a minute, I believe it is supposed to be. But this guy actually was fortunate that he was caught without any damage to internal organs. So he was just a baby. He was released the next day. This bat, again, on a sticky trap down below here. Please, if you find an animal on a sticky trap, bring it into a hospital. We will remove it safely, especially a bat. You don't want to go around handling bats just because of the cause of rabies, or the risk of rabies there. And this little goose was being used as a football by some kids. So again, educate your kids. We want to show respect for wildlife. We want to make sure that they know that this is a living creature that they should be helping and admiring from a distance, not that they should be throwing around and trying to hurt. So hands off litter patrol. Pick up litter anytime you see it. If you see those 6-pack ring holders, cut them up as much as you can. We actually do see those on wildlife quite frequently. Fishing line, responsible disposal of fishing line is huge. Up here in the top, you can see a great blue heron that I chased over the phone for about 3 weeks last year. It had a green Slurpee straw on its lower mandible, so it couldn't eat. Its tongue, you can kind of see, is sticking out here. So it couldn't eat. It became more and more emaciated. By the time it finally got in to the wildlife hospital, it was so emaciated that it was barely alive, and the best thing we could do for it was to help it pass along. But it could still fly, so it was almost impossible to catch. So simple solution, throwing away your garbage, making sure you cut up any garbage that can be cut up, especially the cone-shaped dome lids, to prevent skunks from getting their heads stuck in them. Hands off wildlife in captivity. Be aware of zoonotic diseases. So if you Google raccoon roundworm, you will get a lovely little synopsis on this wonderful worm that is fecal oral, so it's transferred through their feces. And if it gets into your system somehow, it hatches and grows into a worm that burrows into your insides. It's very unpleasant. Google it if you feel like it. Legalities. You can get up to a $100,000 fine and up to a year in prison, I believe, for holding wildlife in captivity as a pet. And cruelty. For these animals, they have very, very specific, as I've mentioned a couple of times, very specific natural histories. And they need a specific habitat. They need different types of flock birds really need company to be able to survive and thrive. They need space to fly. They need to be able to contribute to their ecosystem. And again, zoonotic diseases, this little beautiful bat here up in the top corner is not something you would want to keep definitely long-term at all. Hands off wildlife feeding. So bird feeders are great as long as they are well maintained. So if you have a bird feeder, make sure you take it down at least every 2 weeks. empty it out completely and soak it in a 10% bleach solution, just so that you're preventing the spread of any disease. We do see birds with conjunctivitis, so avian pink eye, and we do see birds with salmonella quite frequently that are having those diseases spread at feeders. So make sure if you have a feeder out, you're feeding responsibly and that you are making sure that feeder is nice and clean and not spreading diseases to other birds. Hummingbird feeders as well. Make sure that you're cleaning that out. Make sure you're using a pipe cleaner to clean any nozzles that they're feeding through, because mold does grow quite quickly in sugar water in those feeders, and you want to keep those hummingbirds safe. You don't want to harm, your intention is usually not to harm the wildlife by feeding them, so you want to just make sure you're doing it right. Any other wildlife other than putting out bird feeders, especially even if you're in a bear area, we don't suggest putting out bird feeders. Don't feed other wildlife just because it is going to cause those animals to depend on humans. If you move away or something should happen to you, that you're not in the area anymore, those animals will continue to come to that area to rely on that person, whoever is there, for food, or they'll start bothering your neighbors, and your neighbors might not be quite as keen to have wildlife knocking on their door as you are. Not only that, it causes dependence for those animals. They lose their foraging skills. They aren't able to care for themselves anymore, especially over the winter. So we want to make sure that they're behaving as naturally as possible and they're not getting handouts from any members of the public anywhere. And for many animals, for bears and coyotes and any of the larger predators, it can be lethal if they get food from you. So a fed bear is a dead bear. If a conservation officer hears about a bear that has been fed by humans, that has had access to human food, that bear has a target on its back, not only for, it sounds bad, but it's for the safety of the people and for the safety of the bear, because we want to keep everyone away from any unnecessary conflict. And it's not the bear's fault. It's not the conservation officer's fault. It's the people's responsibility to make sure that food is well contained and kept away from any wildlife. So why do we keep on trying? Every life saved, so a couple of releases here, is a step to a better future, getting our wildlife back out there, keeping them as wild as possible. So there's some resources for you. And I think we've got a couple of questions on the side here. Okay, so question I've got on the side here is how about ideas for a first aid kit that someone might keep in their vehicle or on hand at home? This does not involve wildlife per se. Oops, where'd it go? But I had a scenario last year where domestic ducks had been released in the Forks area and they were unable to fly away in the fall. They hunkered down on the thin ice near the open water of the Assiniboine River, which essentially made them impossible to capture without specialized equipment. I used my dog's chuck-it to toss a combo of cat kibble and guinea pig pellets to the ice, and they managed to survive a Winnipeg winter. Oh, good for you. If I'll spot them this fall, if I do any suggestions. Just a comment, it's interesting that so many animals sold in pet stores are wildlife from other countries, but no permit is needed to keep them in captivity. That is definitely something that we're working towards. That we don't have much insight onto. There's all kinds of black markets out there for getting exotic animals into captivity, and that's a whole nother conversation. That's a whole nother webinar. I'd be happy to talk to you about that through email. With your domestic ducks that are out on the lake there, I would definitely try to get your SPCA involved, because they are domestic animals. We want them to get into a safe situation living in the wild on their own. I'm guessing they're probably white or black, which will make them very much more visible to predators. We find that we get a lot of pigeons in that we have to transfer to the SPCA because they were released at weddings. They're white pigeons. And because they are white, they are very visible to predators, so we don't want them to be out in the wild. They're not going to survive very long, and it's not going to be a good situation for them if they are out there. So I would try to get your SPCA involved to try and lure them. Again, the box stick string trap works very well for birds that are flighted, to try and get them lured in, to get them into a safe situation in the SPCA. Another note here on the side is consequences for feeding ducks bread. Feeding ducks bread is another personal passion. If I could tell the whole world to keep their cats indoors and not to feed bread to ducks, I definitely would. Feeding ducks bread is very bad for them, especially with little developing guys. It can cause metabolic bone disease, which makes their bones very soft as they're developing, and causes easily breakable bones as they're growing up. It can cause something called angel wing. So their bones actually develop upside down, that their wrist has a turnaround in which, in a wild animal, this will prevent them from ever being able to fly as they grow. So they will be a flightless bird for their life, which will likely be a shorter lifespan for that animal. Also with birds and bread, any birds with bread, bread has very low nutritional value in it, even if it is the whole wheat stuff. It's not something that you never see a bird who's a baker. You see a bird who's eating seeds, you see a bird who's eating corn, you see a bird, they eat only natural foods, usually, unless they're a gull in the city eating McDonald's, because they do that. But we don't suggest that they do that. We don't want them to do that. We want to make sure we limit their capacity to eat foods that are not healthy for them, and they're sticking to their natural food sources. So bread, what happens when a bird eats bread is that it goes into their crop, which is a pre-digestive storage area, and it swells up, just like it does in your mouth. It swells up and expands and causes them to feel full without actually stimulating the desire to eat anything that has nutritional value for them. So it's not great for them. Let me see here. I did call the Humane Society, who suggested calling the wildlife rehab folks, who did not respond to my call. But I'll keep the box trap in mind, and if I see them again. So good luck with your ducks. Hopefully you are able to see them again. Hopefully you are able to catch them. With these guys, what I would also suggest is if there is any type of building nearby, or if you can construct any V-shaped fence and have a box or something large at the end, or a pen set up at the end that you can lure them into, that you can walk them into. The bigger the V shape, the more likely they'll walk into it, and then you can get them trapped into that at the end. I can't really think of a better way to describe it, but if you can get them into that, you'll have them in a contained area and hopefully be able to get them into a safer situation. So how to become a wildlife rehabber or training for specialties like oiled wildlife. The best way to become a wildlife rehabber is to volunteer. I started as a volunteer, as well as a kids camp counselor at the Wildlife Rescue, so a part-time position, but volunteering is great. You start cleaning a lot of poop, which is to each their own. Some people prefer it. If you don't want to do that, you can always do dishes. There's lots and lots of dishes to do. But we'd like to encourage everyone to become a volunteer, because all the organizations that I know of that are wildlife rescues need volunteers. At Wildlife Rescue Association of BC, we rely on about 200 volunteers at any given time to help us get animals into our center, care for the animals in our center, and release animals again from our center. Getting into training for oiled wildlife. Keep your eye out on the Oiled Wildlife Society's network. Oiled Wildlife Society of British Columbia has some trainings, I think, coming up fairly soon. We usually do a yearly training in March, shortly before the Wildlife Rehabilitators Network of BC conference. That is a daily training, or a day-long training session as to what to do and how to respond in an oil spill, and how to become a first responder, which is an awesome opportunity. It's great to be a part of that, be a part of a community in a crisis like that.